Hey, Callie. All that pink stuff. It's not supposed to go there. Well, it has been a hot minute since I made an upload, and I am extremely sorry for that. But despite not a whole lot of visual progress, I have been doing a boatload of work to get this to where it's at. And I'm happy to report it is great. So let's go ahead and summarize, basically get you up to speed on what has happened. A lot of fairing, a lot of sanding. I got this thing down to one single color, a single coat. I'm actually cheating right now. This is just a whole bunch of water to make it look shiny so that I could see all the curvature. But it is honestly way better than I could even have hoped for. The fact of the matter is, I only took it down to about 600 grit, which is this dull surface here, and there's a couple reasons for that. The primer is not super hard, and you need a hard surface to get a nice, I guess, mirror finish out of it. So it really just isn't capable of getting down to a really nice surface. The second is behind this is just, fiberglass and one layer of fiberglass and some foam. And so it's really not hard enough even behind it to get that nice of a surface either. I also learned from making this seat mold that the gel coat backed with this fiberglass is actually a really nice surface to work with, and this polished down extremely easily and very quickly. So instead of wasting a whole bunch of time on the helicopter to then have to also waste a whole bunch of time cleaning up the mold, I figured why not just cut it short on the helicopter, and then we'll make all those imperfections go away once we get to this phase. Before we get into all that though, I really think it's important that we discuss the materials that we used again on the plug, the materials we'll be using on the mold, the compatibility between the two, and the hot mess you can get yourself into if you don't do this right. I've done a lot of research on this and spent a lot of time thinking about it, and I hope I can save some of you guys some of that time and heartache that I wish I would have done before I started this. Everything we're doing from this point forward is a desperate attempt to get this stuff, gel coat, to go onto that surface, not spoil, not peel up, not alligator, and not just make a bad day, but what would be a bad week or month if you don't do it right. I'm over this. I'm ready to be done. It's just a huge kick in the nuts. I think we're gonna have to pull this all apart. We sent it, and it didn't work. I've clearly been scarred. I've had a horrible time getting this stuff to work, and so I'm going to do everything I can on this attempt to do this right the first time and get this to go perfect. I also want to give a huge shout out to TotalBoat. They've sponsored me with all the materials that you'll be seeing in this video. I've also included links for all the materials that I've used in the description below, so you can use them and know that you're going to do this right. And all of those links are also associated with my affiliate link, which will provide all of you guys a 5% discount at checkout, and it also helps me out as well. And as a reminder for the plug, we use an epoxy-based resin with an epoxy-based fairing compound. That fairing compound on the website, on TotalBoat's website, gives a warning that you should not use or have any of that fairing compound exposed for when you're putting a polyester gel coat on top. More on that in a second. And then we use an epoxy-based primer to seal everything up. Now, I did have two issues with the plug when everything was final. I had a thin spot up here that I was worried the gel coat would seep through and wreck everything in that process. And then I had another location where I had a high spot with that fairing compound. It was exposed. I debated heavily if I could just leave it or not, but ultimately I decided to put one more thin layer of epoxy primer on there to seal everything up, just so I know for sure I'm not going to have any issues. I do know for a fact, and it's once again published on TotalBoat's website, that this epoxy-based primer plays very well with gel coat. So as long as I have a nice conformed coat of epoxy primer, everything should be good to go, and that's where we're at. Now this mold's a little too big and far too complex to make in one piece, and for that we're going to have a parting line and basically split this thing into two. In order to do that, we have to add some flanges to this plug to make this possible. For that we need to talk about those materials and how those are going to be compatible with the gel coat as well. Full transparency here, I've actually never made a two-part mold or these flanges, so I don't really know what I'm doing. I'm just going based off of the things that I've researched and what I found. I'm also not using the best materials or the ones that are probably most suggested for this. So we'll cover throughout this what is probably the best material to use, and then the substitutes that I've been able to find local or wherever. The first that is the flange that you're going to be creating. You use just about any material to create that flange. You're going to mold release it anyways. In most cases, you want to be able to just easily form it, but it needs to be stiff enough to support that layup that you're going to be doing. The ideal material would be like a acrylic or polycarbonate. In our case, we're going to be using a corrugated plastic sheet. This is basically the stuff you make signs out of. It's cheap. Local hardware store has it, and it's easy to conform. Disadvantage is it's not super stiff, and the parting line can be difficult because you are left with this laminate basically, and so you can have an issue down here at the parting line. Now I'll be mounting this to the helicopter or the plug with just hot glue. That should be totally sufficient, and then we'll use some popsicle sticks to support it and make it be a little bit more stiff. Once that's down, you do need something to fill the void between your flange and the mold. Now, the ideal material for this is something that Easy Composite sells. It's called, I believe it's yellow filleting wax. Cannot find it in the States, and frankly didn't want to wait for it from Easy Composite, so I did a little research and I found this. This is just some Chavant clay, modeling clay, sulfur free. Back to compatibility things here. The yellow filleting wax from Easy Composites plays extremely well with gel coat, and you don't need to do anything to it. You just fill in your void and you're good to go. This clay does not play well with gel coat, so you'd have to do something to fix it. So we'll put this clay down, and then we'll follow it up with a spray clear shellac. That shellac will give a nice protective barrier over it. It's hard, and it does play well with the gel coat, and so that'll seal everything off and everything should be just fine. And then finally, the last material that I'm probably going to end up using, which is just box tape, 2-inch box tape. Now, I've heard that the gel coat does not adhere very well while it's curing to this box tape, and oxygen can basically get underneath it, and it creates alligatoring. And so if you do use box tape, which I will, basically you can just spray that shellac over the box tape as well, and that'll once again seal that surface and hopefully create a better surface for that gel coat to adhere to. So those are the materials that we're going to be using to create these flanges. The next step is to get a nice thick layer of mold release on this plug so that everything else that goes down will hopefully come off later. I hope that's not foreshadowing. In my case, I'm going to be using Partall Paste number 2. The other popular choice is called PVA. It's a liquid that you can apply with either a brush or paint. I had, I don't know, a horrible first attempt. I should give it more tries, but I had a horrible first attempt at it and just didn't like it, and so I resorted back to just Partall Paste number 2. It takes a little bit more effort to put down, but I had a lot of success with it earlier, and so that's basically what I'm going to be using going forward. It goes on like an automotive wax. You put it on wet, wait a little bit for it to kind of solidify. You don't want to wait too long, maybe 3 or 4 minutes, and then come back and clean it up. The directions say it suggests about 3 coats. In the past, I've used 6, and that has been, once again, really good for me. So we're going to go with 6 coats again. So dealing with that corrugated plastic is going to be pretty difficult to try and get these curves into it. So I went ahead and grabbed some cardboard. This is just to cover flooring for construction sites. I had it left over from the bottom of my paint booth. And we're just going to go ahead and start with this to make a template. Once the template's made, I'll transfer it over to the corrugated plastic and we should be good to go. When trying to match the curves of your template to your body, just a real quick tip, you can actually do a rough cut on the template and then fill in the gaps with just a whole bunch of small pieces of blue tape. That'll give you that complex curve, and then you can transfer all that again to, in my case, the corrugated plastic, and that'll give me that nice shape that I'm looking for. I was going to attempt to explain what I was trying to do before I had all this on here, but quickly realized it was going to make a lot more sense to share with you once I was done. You can see that I've used this corrugated sign material plastic to create all these flanges, and there's basically two different types of flanges that we have going on, and I want to kind of explain myself through those. The first and most obvious use for this material and the flange is the parting line. So that's what I used for up here and then around the back and down the bottom. Those are where the two halves of the molds will bolt together, and basically you'll lay in a fiberglass flange and that's what those will rest against. So pretty straightforward there. The rest of the flanges, just like the one that we're using around the cockpit opening, serve a different purpose. This is basically just to extend the width or the size of my mold because the carbon fiber part needs to come pretty close to this edge, and there was no more material on my plug to leave enough flange so that I could come back and put the sticky tape or the flow material or anything else on the edge of my mold. So I had to be able to extend it a little bit further. It also pulls what will eventually be the Gelcoat and the fiberglass off the plug so that I can actually separate it. The last thing I need to consider and make sure is that once I've laid the Gelcoat and the fiberglass down, especially in the locations where I just planned on using the plug as my flange, is that it would release and have a nice line where the Gelcoat could end and I could eventually peel this whole mold off. And so that's the purpose of this duct tape. The duct tape, hopefully, and I'll put some release on it, but from what I can tell, between duct tape and release, that will release the mold from the plug when we're all done, and this will give me kind of a visual line to make sure that I don't go any further and I don't get into the rough spots where I don't have release, and it'll make sure that this plug, or excuse me, this mold is the proper size and will all separate when I'm done. And one last thing, so I created this halo around the top, and I'm not sure how this is going to work out, but the plan is I will leave this halo in, I'll lay in this side of the mold, we'll pull these plastic flanges off, that will give us the mold flange to lay up against. Then on this side, once this is gone, I'll lay up this side of the mold while still leaving this halo in. Once both sides of the molds are in and I pull this all off, I can pull this halo off as well. My hope is that this will leave me a nice area to actually make a third piece to my mold. I'll basically cap off the top of this and then lay in another layer of Gelcoat and fiberglass, and that will close off the top of the mold, and it'll give me a really nice smooth geometry, hopefully, to lay up that carbon fiber without having all this crazy kind of geometry in its place. And the next step is to go back everywhere where we installed these flanges and fill the gap between the flange and the plug with the clay that I mentioned earlier. A couple things to know here as well. Since this flange is just extending the mold, what this looks like doesn't really matter. You can make this a fillet, you can make it look however you want. Remember, we are going to seal this off and make it release, so it really doesn't matter how much you use here. Now, that is not the case for the parting line. Wherever you have the flange for the parting line of your plug or your mold, you need to make sure that this fillet in here is as small as possible and it just fills the crack. The reason for that is if you have any leftover material or clay, that's going to create kind of a void in your parting line, and that seam won't be very good. So come in here and cut away and get as much of that out as possible, and that'll set you up for the best I guess, parting line in the future. And I almost forgot one last thing before we start sealing up all of this clay. You have to put these little, well, in this case, we chose pyramids, but you cut little pyramids out of your clay. And what that does is it gives you basically a male-female location, I guess, mechanical feature that will make the two parts go back together once you have two big molds. And so I went around and put those, I don't know, you can see, not too many, but enough to, I think, would locate it just fine. I did not do that up here on the halo. I think just the natural geometry of that being a pyramid basically by itself is enough. And so we're going to leave that as is and hope that will work when we finish that last piece. I went ahead and moved the helicopter into the paint booth, and this is where she will lay, at least for the remainder of this side of the mold. Couple reasons for that. I'm going to start spraying shellac, and I don't want it to go in the house. And so we're going to start sealing all of those clay spots with shellac. Now, I did lie to you. I think I'm going to use this in all of the areas that are basically the non-parting line locations. And the reason for that is this is going to put a little bit of buildup, and it might affect the plug, I think, maybe in that way. And so I did a lot of thinking, and basically I did go out and get some PVA. And so we're going to try to use the PVA on all of the parting lines. That way, when I pull those parting line flanges off, I know this is water soluble, and anything left behind I can take off, get it really nice and clean, and then go ahead and proceed with the other side. So that's kind of the thought process behind this. I didn't want to leave anything in the mold that could cause an issue when I take that flange off and we start that other side. I went ahead and cleaned everything one more time with acetone just to make sure that the surface was nice and clean and the shellac and PVA would go on really well. I put 3 coats down. I let it flash off for about 10 minutes on each coat, and that seemed to work well. There were a couple runs, but honestly, I'm not too worried about it. The next step here is to, I'm actually going to put 3 more layers of that Partol paste onto the mold, just to make sure that after doing all this work, I didn't, I don't know, mess anything up. Better safe than sorry. So we'll get 3 nice layers of the Partol paste back down on the plug surface, and then for the flanges, as I mentioned before, we're going to come back through and go ahead and lay down at least 3 layers of the PVA. All right, it's time for PVA. So it sounds like there's an aerosol kind of sprayer that most people use. You can also use like a HVLP spray gun and an air compressor. I went and I found this spray bottle, and this actually mists really fine, and it's not like a traditional spray bottle. You pump it, basically, it charges the chamber and it mists out the top. So I think that's going to be okay. I found this at a local Michael's, hence why I'm using it. I also think from the last time and reading these instructions, these explicitly say do not dilute the PVA. The last time I diluted it to 50-50, and that could very well be why I had so many issues with it. So we're going to proceed with this. It says apply 3 layers. The first one do a mist, and then the following 2 layers do kind of a flow coat. So we'll give this a whirl and see what happens. No, that's not going to work. Woo! Not gonna happen. Well, clearly that didn't work. Round 2, we're gonna use a traditional spray gun. Can't tell you if this is gonna work well, but we're gonna try anyways. So the first coat was a fail at best. I ended up just going back. It was hard to video, but just wiping everything down with a paper towel and getting kind of a thin coat everywhere. I also got it on kind of the bulk part of the plug, mainly because it dripped. I may come back and actually just wipe all that up with water um, later because I don't think it's needed. Long story short, it didn't work. So I'm going to come back and do the following two coats just with a sponge brush and a cup. I think I'll have more control over it. I think I can get a better flow coat, and all in all, it'll be better. Probably should just bought the aerosol spray can thing, but we're here. We're going to make it work. Well, the PVA is down. It is okay at best, maybe. Probably why I don't like using it. And I'm sure it's because I don't have the right stuff to put it down. So um, I can't knock on it too hard. It's probably most definitely user error. There is some surface imperfections that are on the actual plug. I'll get some close-ups here for you. It's just the name of the game. You're going to put a film on it. If it bubbles or if you have a run, it's going to be on there, and that's going to transfer to your mold. So in these cases, I think they're small enough. I'm not going to worry about it too much, but it is what it is, and that's also why I tried to keep the bulk of the plug with just the part I'll paste, because I knew that wouldn't leave any big blemishes. So it is what it is. We're going to ship it. Another thing to note too, I noticed that where I sprayed the shellac, it actually adhered a little bit better, or the PVA adhered better to that. And I think it's because the plastic basically makes the PVA beat up and run off easier. And the shellac gave a little bit better of a surface that that liquid could attach to. So take it for what it is. I might pivot and do something slightly different on the other side, but whatever. It is what it is. Well, it's finally time to start laying down the gel coat. The 10% of the effort is finished. It's time for the 90%, which is spraying. But before we get to that, we have to talk about materials again. So we will be using gel coat, and this is the important part, without wax. So you can add a wax additive to gel coat, and basically it will float to the surface, it'll seal the gel coat off, and it'll allow for a full cure. That's because gel coat and resin doesn't actually fully cure in the presence of oxygen. So if you were doing a final coat of gel coat, you would want something with wax, once again, to promote that full cure. Otherwise, it will stay tacky for a little while. It's not perfect for forever, but it will stay tacky for a little while. So we will be using gel coat without wax because, once again, we're going to throw down the gel coat on the plug. The surface against the plug won't be exposed to oxygen, so that will fully cure. But the surface on the outer layer will be exposed to oxygen, and that will stay tacky. That will allow us to do a couple things. It'll allow us to put down more than one coat of gel coat and have a little bit more time leeway in between. And once the gel coat is fully down, it will also allow us to come up and lay the fiberglass on top of that with laminating resin. Same story goes with the laminating resin. This is without wax, so it will not fully cure. And so that'll allow us to put multiple layers on top of each other without having to scuff it up and getting a mechanical bond, and also help promote a chemical bond, which is better. I did use a laminating coat all the way to the finish. In some instances, you can add for instance, wax to the last layer so you don't end up with a wax or a tacky layer. But for the seat mold, it actually fully cured over a while, and it was good enough. So that's what we're going to use. We'll just use everything without wax, and we'll finish this out. To lay the gel coat down, I bought a cup gun. I previously tried to use a VLP, high volume, low pressure gun, to do it last time, and it just didn't work that well. Not to mention, it is a total pain in the butt to clean a spray gun, and it's way easier to clean a cup gun. There's basically only two parts. We're going to lay this gel coat down in 3 coats. Each one should be anywhere from 10 to 20 mils. I cheated and used ChatGPT to calculate all the things that I needed, and so we're going to use those values to mix and spray this down. I'll be using a 2mm nozzle. ChatGPT said to use 2 to 3. I didn't want to use a 3, it looked really big, so we resorted back to 2mm. Well, we need to have a quick post-mortem on the near disaster of what just took place. I tried to start with the cup gun. I started with I think a 2mm nozzle. That just didn't work. It wasn't spraying fast enough. It would have taken 2 hours to get out. Quickly pivoted, switched to a 3mm. Same kind of story. It was just a disaster. It took forever. I pivoted again and I tried to use a roller, which didn't work very well and wasn't going to get into the cracks. So then I pivoted again and used a foam brush, which I didn't realize. Hindsight, I probably should now. The gel coat ate the foam brush, so that didn't work. And then I finally resorted back to a standard brush and proceeded to finish it out that way. The first coat didn't go on very well. It was thin up top, and it just wasn't ideal. In the whole rush of everything trying to get it done, I probably didn't wait long enough between the first coat and the second coat. And in my infinite wisdom, I also thought that altering between colors would work well, so I went from pink to white to pink. And actually, I do. That was, if you want to do that and have the time and the materials, do that. It allowed me to see the coverage, but it also showed the pink spots where it was still wet, and you can see it blend into the white. And those are the locations that probably should have cured a little longer before I went for the second coat. The third coat went on perfect. It's back to pink. I waited long enough. It all got tacky, cured up, and that actually went really, really well. Side note, I wasn't shooting for pink. I mean, my girls love it, but I wasn't shooting for pink. I ordered, Total Boat gave me all these materials. At the time, they didn't have any clear gel coat, and you're supposed to use those colors in clear. I got red, and so red and white makes pink, and there's the pink. I wanted to color it in some way because I noticed on the seat mold that when it was white, it was really hard to see the imperfections, and so I was hoping that a little bit of color would end up finishing the mold a little bit better. So pink is what we got. Not too bad, but yeah, that's where we are. Oh, it's right about now that you guys should be asking yourself or saying, hey, Callie, all that pink stuff, it's not supposed to go there. Oh my God. Well, turns out that ChatGPT is not always right, and it can't always do math because the math didn't math. I was using ChatGPT to help me understand and calculate the amount of catalyst I was supposed to use in the gel coat. And although it knew I wanted 1.75%, somewhere along the way when I asked it to split it into 3 different coats and to tell me how much I should add for each coat, it just didn't math. I don't know. I ended up kicking it off at 1.1% instead of 1.75%. And I realized that when I came down this morning or this afternoon and the buckets of leftover gel coat were not Cure. And so then I started looking at the actual gel coat on the body, and sure enough, it just wasn't brittle and it was soft. and it wasn't any good. Oh my God. So then I tore it all apart. Good news is the clay kind of worked. I should seal it better, is what I learned. Seal the clay better. The duct tape released really nice, so I can use that again. And I clearly had enough release that it all came off. So it wouldn't have stuck had this all worked out. Oh my God. I can't believe it. Can't believe it. Double check your math. I've done this before. Double check your math. Don't trust ChatGPT. It may be wrong. Oh my God. And on that horrible bombshell, go build something cool. I guess I'm still not learning. Oh my God. And we will see you on the next one.